Welcome to the Richer Soul podcast, Don Williams. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to our time together today.
As have I. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Oh, wow. About growing up, I kind of had the perfect childhood. My father was a United States Marine. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we didn't really have any money, but I didn't know it. And I'm old enough. I'm older than you, Rocky, and so I'm old enough that a lot of people didn't have money then, And so, it's kind of a different world. And then what I learned about money, both my parents were the first generation off the farm. And so my grandparents were farmers in Kansas and Oklahoma, and my other grandparents owned farmland in North Dakota. And so farmers, if you spend any time with them, they never act like they have any money, and maybe they don't, but they typically have paid for land. And so they're asset heavy and maybe cash light. But I grew up in a world where you didn't ever, first you tried to fix it with Elmer's glue, and then you tried to fix it with duct tape, and then you tried to fix it with baling wire. And when the repairs didn't work, maybe then you went and got another, maybe not a new one, probably not a new one, but you went and got another one. And literally my mother's father, my grandfather, I can remember him buying, the refrigerator went out, and I can remember him going to the junkyard and buying a $5 refrigerator. And so just a different world. I grew up in, hey, nobody has any money, and so you never spend anything. Keep it all, save everything.
I don't know that people have money now. They might pretend like they do because it's all on a credit card.
Yeah.
But whether they actually have money is a different story. And I think that's probably because instead of buying the $5 refrigerator, they bought the $3,000 one with the light up display. It's funny. I saw one again the other day. I was at the store. I'm like, the problem with a computerized fridge with the built-in display is that the technology of the display will never last as long as that fridge does. Although today, the fridge might not last either.
Sad but true.
And so it just amazes me that people will do these types of things,
I'll tell you another funny about my grandfather, if I could. So my grandfather owned a lot of rental property, and I think you would today that you would call him a slumlord. And so he owned very inexpensive houses in typically not a good area of town. And on the first of the month, he literally would go to the door, to collect the rent. And he had a lot of them. And so now he, from North Dakota, a boy during the Depression. And so he kept his books. My kids used to joke and say, "Dad, you're so tight." And I'm like, "Oh, you wouldn't know tight. You would know tight if it was a rope around your neck. You would not know tight." My grandfather kept his books for his rental properties on brown grocery bags so that he did not have to buy paper.
So he had lots of money.
He had some coins. I'll just say that. He did well. He never spent anything. He literally, I can't believe I'm telling you this. My grandmother and he lived in a really little house, little itty bitty house. And he bought a new house, but he bought a house that was in the pathway of a highway expansion. So it was condemned by right of eminent domain, and it was being sold to the highest bidder. And he was the highest bidder. And my grandfather, and one of the requirements of the house, before I tell you what he paid for it, one of the requirements of the house was that you had to pick it up, move it, and fill in the basement because they're going to expand a highway. So he bought the house for $1. He was the high bidder, moved it across town, put it on a lot, like 3 or 4 lots from their little bitty house. Took him about a year to fix it up, and then they moved in that, and they lived there until they passed. But so that was a long, rambling answer to your very direct question: is what did I know about money as a child? And I was like, here's what I know. Never spend anything. Keep it all.
So let's talk a couple things, because it's funny. When I was a kid, we didn't have these fancy book covers that they get now. We used to take brown paper bags, and that was our book cover. And the cool thing, kids love them because you got to design them, right? You got crayons and markers, or I don't even know if we had markers. But we used to do that all the time, and that paper lasted a good long time. That was back when we really used to recycle and reuse things and be able to do that. It's funny how wasteful we are today and how much stuff we have that we really don't need. And I think as I'm getting later into life, I'm getting rid of more and more along those lines. But it just seems kind of silly.
I think that's so true. I hear people say, well, it's the kids this and the kids that. And I'm like, yeah, except, we're the ones who taught them. And so every time you start blaming the kids, I think you have to look in the mirror because we're the ones who taught them and who exposed them to what they're exposed to as a kid.
I taught my kids to be frugal and money wise.
I think I did too, though I would say compared to my mother is relaxed from my grandfather's position about money. I'm relaxed from my mother's position about money, and my kids, I think, are somewhat relaxed about my position about money. And I actually think that probably all that's probably pretty good because my grandfather was very, very strict about money. I have a friend who's a physician, and he grew up in a very similar circumstance. And young people today will just be like, man, they're so out of it. I can't believe they lived. It was so hard for them. They could not wash their hands in warm water in their home because the father thought it was wasteful of money to heat water to wash your hands. And you're like, oh my gosh, maybe that cost a penny back then, but it's more the philosophy, I think, than the actual mechanics.
It doesn't sound like that frugality held you back, though, from the way you treat money today. Or did it take a bit of letting go to have that?
Well, what I knew as a young man, as an adolescent, is that I didn't have everything that I thought I deserved. And I don't have a great big I want button. I'm not one of those people who goes through life on the hedonistic treadmill of I want. That's not me. But there were things I did want and places I wanted to go and things I wanted to do. And there was never the means to do that. And so I knew at a very early age that if I wanted to do those things, I would have to earn the money with which to fund those activities. And so I did. It's pretty simple. I saw Nick Saban the other day, and he said, he was talking to the Alabama football team several years ago, and he's like, the world owes you nothing. You're entitled to nothing. We'll give you nothing. Everything you get, you'll earn. And I was like, man, maybe we should tell 5-year-olds that. Kind of like George Foreman, he told his kids, Shaq is the same way. I'm rich. You're poor. I think there's something wise to that.
You mean you didn't tell your kids that? I told my kids that.
I didn't tell my kids that, but we purposely lived beneath. We lived more modestly than we could have because I didn't see any reason. Like I said, I don't have that big I want button. And so I don't want a new car every year. I don't want a new Rolex. I just don't. That's not me. And so I don't think my kids had any idea what the real state of the economy was. I just don't think they knew. In fact, I know they didn't know. And I don't think that's bad either.
I think for us it was somewhat of a dichotomy in the sense that there were things that they got to do that were probably not the norm. Like we'd go to Disney for 2 weeks, or they might sit in first class, but they were told that that was a privilege. It wasn't an expectation. We wouldn't splurge when we were at the parks, but we knew how to enjoy without wasting. And I think it's probably the way most people should live. It doesn't sound like you lived in poverty. You lived a nice life. I can tell, right? Just because you don't have a new Rolex doesn't mean your life isn't pretty good.
Well, and I have watches. I just don't have a newer one. Yeah, I don't think anybody would say, oh, poor Don's doing without. But by the same token, there is that hedonistic treadmill where some people are just addicted to more stuff, more. And I think I like what Zig used to say, it's okay to have all the money you want. As long as as long as you got money, that's fine. But when money's got you, it's not good. And I think there's some real wisdom in that.
No, I agree with that. I stopped wearing I had a Rolex. I stopped wearing it, and I stopped wearing watches for most of my life until I got an Apple Watch. And the only reason I got an Apple Watch was to track stuff. Now, I don't even want it, it's set so that it doesn't ding or stuff. I just want it to be able to track my movement and my fitness level and stuff. That's the only real reason I wear it. But other than that, I don't really pay attention to it.
Well, and to me, it's not a, what's the hip term? It's not a flex. If you're wearing a $20,000 watch and you got an 8-hour work day and it's crammed and slammed with stuff, I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe you need an $80 Casio and, and a little piece.
There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, just saying.
Of course, we think alike. We're both INTJs, which is a rarity in the world of the way that personalities are, but it turns us into system people, and I think it probably makes us a bit more pragmatic and practical in a sense.
I think so. And it is really, if anybody wants to look it up on Myers-Briggs, it's really pretty unique to be INTJ. I mean, it's like me, Rocky, and two other people. No, it's not quite that skinny, but it's pretty skinny. I think it's like 2% of the world. But I do think that, it means that we're wired. We have similar wiring.
Mm?
Yeah. Similar wiring, and we're fairly contemporary. I mean, we're both of an age where we don't have all of our hair.
You have more than me.
Yeah, well, if you notice, most of it's gray, and
Mhm.
so I just look at it like this: every day with hair is a good hair day, and I'm good. I looked at my wife was redoing our passports, I don't know, a couple years ago, and they were going to expire, and so she's reapplying, and she prints it out what she's done online for me to look at before we finalize it. And I look at it and I get to hair color and I'm like, hair color? You put hair color is gray. And she's like, oh, you're an idiot. And I'm like, what? She's like, go look in the mirror. And I go look in the mirror and of course it's mainly gray, but perspective is so powerful. And when I look in the mirror, I see 25-year-old Dawn who had brown hair and was thin and, was kind of a mix between Tom Selleck and Tom Cruise or maybe Tom and Jerry, I don't know. But my wife, who knows all of my foibles, she keeps me honest. And so, but we see things the way we see them, and many times it's not accurate.
Really?
Many, many times. It's, and so, a human is, there's some stimulus that's in front of them. They have a reaction. They automatically think their reaction is right and that anybody who disagrees is wrong. But when you think about it, like even Albert Einstein, all human knowledge, what percentage could Albert have known? A millionth of a 1%, maybe? And so to be so arrogant is to just think that I'm right every time. And if you disagree with me, Rocky, you're obviously wrong and not thinking correctly. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But we live in a world where that is people's normal default is I'm right, you're wrong. It's an interesting world.
Based on your programming and the way you view the world, I can see that.
There you go. Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm right because I may not be.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is how much their view of the world is through a set of lenses that, quite frankly, if someone else looked through them, they'd be like, how can you even see anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And I think it's no different than if I put on my glasses, I see the world differently. And if I put on your point of view, if I'm open-minded enough to even consider it for a split second, I think sometimes I begin to question my own point of view. Not every time, but sometimes.
That's a natural part of being an INTJ, though, is always to upgrade the programming because we want to make sure the programming is correct.
Yeah, we do.
And so we don't mind being challenged on it.
I don't mind being challenged, and I don't mind redirecting based on new information or redeciding based on new information. Doesn't bother me a bit. Some people that really bothers, as you know.
98%?
Yeah, the other. Well, you, me, and the other two. And so, but doesn't bother me. One of I think I've taken all of them. Culture Index, Predictive Index. One of the ones I really like is the VIA survey. It's free. Well, there's a free version and like a $50 version, I think. But the free, it rates you on 20 character strengths. And it doesn't mean that number 20 is a weakness. It just means it's harder for you. But I really like that one. I think that's effective to know in team building. And so my top three are judgment, perspective, and honesty, which all that sounds really great. Judgment, I make good decisions. Of course, the flip side to making good decisions, flip side to having judgment is I'm judgmental. That's not that attractive. That's not that great. And perspective, I see how to put things together quicker and easier and in a different manner than most people, but you add that to the perspective, and I'm really not accepting of other people's opinions. And then honesty is a great one, except, we pretty much live in a dishonest world, and so it's uncomfortable for somebody who cannot abide by dishonesty. So, but I think the world is a many-colored place, and all people provide some value if we'll just sit down and listen.
To us, right?
Or just listen to the other guy or the other gal. Just listen to the other person. Just treat them. I was speaking in Nebraska last week, and there was another speaker, and black gentleman, jazz musician, literally played with Chuck Berry, the father of rock and roll. But his real claim to fame to me was that he had influenced over 200 people to renounce their membership and turn their back on the Ku Klux Klan. And you're like, wow, that's a pretty heavy lift. When you show up at a Klan meeting, you're obviously not supposed to be there. But he had literally befriended one of the Imperial Wizards, which I didn't know what that meant, but it's kind of like the Grand Poobah of the thing. And his core values were very simple. I listened. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants to be loved. Okay. And he said, and so I talked to people like that. And sometimes it took years, but I thought, man, there's just so much wisdom. That guy's name is Daryl Davis, super guy, great musician. It's like, oh my gosh. But to peacefully, non-confrontationally, as a black man, convinced 200 people to leave the Ku Klux Klan over the last 40 years. It's been his life's work. It's like, wow, your rewards won't show up in your bank account on that one. But they'll show up. They're just not going to show up as dollars.
You never know, though.
I don't know. I don't know. But
how much did they pay him to speak?
A nice speaker's fee.
I figured as much.
Yeah, nice speaker's fee, and worth every penny. So yeah, it's an interesting world. The Chinese say, "May you live in interesting times." We do, and I'm grateful for that.
I think all times are interesting, and people don't realize that. And it was it really became clear when COVID first hit, which was a little earlier than this, about 5 years ago. And parents were like, oh my God, our kids, they're not going to be able to walk in graduation. This is the poorest generation ever. And then somebody wrote and goes, well, back in the 60s, you were being drafted and sent to Vietnam, right? They were killing presidents and black leaders, and there were riots in the streets. And it's actually not so bad that you just don't get to go to high school graduation.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back at any point in history, things always weren't so great. But we don't realize that, do we?
Well, no. The interesting thing about history is this. Every 100 years, you get all new people. And so they don't have that memory of what my grandparents, both sets of my grandparents, were raised on farms, one in Kansas, one in North Dakota, with no running water and no electricity. And so the day they had indoor plumbing was like way better than when the new PlayStation came out. And the day they could flip a switch instead of using a kerosene lantern for light was amazing. And to think of my grandparents who went from that to seeing space travel, I can remember my one grandmother was always kind of amazed at a cordless telephone. And not a mobile, but one where you didn't have a 20-foot long Harvest Gold cord on it to where you could move around the room. Okay, a cordless phone. And now what we're seeing, the technological advances we're seeing with AI, we're basically, every 90 days is an entirely new world in AI land. And so if somebody tells you an expert, says they're an expert, you should probably ask them, so when's the last time you were studying? because it's moving so fast, and it's just going to accelerate. It's not going to slow down. It's not going to stay the same. It is going to accelerate.
Very true. Have you heard of this book, The Fourth Turning?
I
Neil
have.
Howe?
Yeah, I've not read it, but I've heard of it.
Well, basically, every 80 to 100 years, history kind of repeats.
Yeah.
It rhymes, and it rhymes within even where you started the conversation of, grandpa was extremely frugal and each generation got less frugal until one generation blows it all. And then the next generation becomes frugal again. And these cycles go through every single part of life. And so when I look around and people are complaining, I'm like, hey, we're in the right part of the cycle and we're going to go back. And so, in 10 or 20 years, frugality might be back again. Who's to say? Not on purpose, but because that's just where we're at in the economic cycle or in the lifestyle cycle.
Yeah, what's that saying? Hard times make strong leaders. Strong leaders make good times make weak leaders.
Yes.
And so
it's
a cycle for sure. It's a cycle.
So you had this strong upbringing, relatively decent life, a little bit of that military discipline thrown in there. And then did you go straight into the business world or did you do something else in between?
So I went to Wichita State University for like 2 minutes. I did not complete even the first semester. Thought I was going to be an engineer. Math and science were always my strong points. Calculus was my first class. The schoolwork was not the problem, but I had a part-time sales job, so I was selling evenings and Saturdays, and I was doing really well. And I went to my career guidance person at the university and said, hey, how much money am I going to make in 4 years when I graduate? And they told me, and I was like, I'm making more than that now. And I was just working maybe 25 hours a week. And so I became a full-time salesperson, and then I really became the top salesman in the country out of 450 people. And they promoted me to manager and became the top manager and the kind of manager that got the most sales, the most dollars, but also who would promote other performing managers. And to me, a real leader is helping build other leaders. And so I kind of had my thumbprint across the entire organization. I worked my way into partnership with that owner. And then we had a disagreement. It was time to do distributions. He didn't. And I was like, why? And he told me something and said, take about 30 days. And I was like, okay. And so I came back 30 days later and said, it's time. And he said, I'm not ready. And I resigned. And I went into competition, became a competitor of his because that's what I knew. And we reconciled many years later, and it is what it is. Pretty much everything happens in your path for a reason. And I probably needed to become my own boss. And
well, it's because you're an INTJ. That's just the way we are.
Like I've told people for years, I was like, if I could find a good leader, I'd be a good follower. I just can't find one.
We naturally don't want to lead. We're great number twos.
Yeah.
We don't need to be in the limelight. At least I don't prefer to be. I'd rather let somebody else deal with all that stuff. Just tell me what needs to get done and I'll make sure it gets done. And it's kind of funny because I was in sales for most of my life too. By nature, we don't fit the mold of salespeople. I came to realize the reason I did so well at sales is because what sales is really about is fixing problems. And I had a skill. I could listen and I knew how to fix problems, and I would run to problems, not run away from problems. And so I just naturally did that in ways that others couldn't. And I think that's just what made me successful. And I was like, I don't need to do anything until they have a problem. And when they do, I'll fix it. And then they'll want whatever I have.
I do think people that are wired the way you and I are I'll call non-typical salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
Also, assert that many times we're the best salespeople on the planet. And if you're interviewing, if you own a business and you're interviewing a salesperson and they tell you they're the best that ever lived, you should hire them because they may be. If they tell you they're pretty good, I never hire those people. I only hire the ones that tell me they're great because they're a true artist I learned very early to be 100%. Today we would say authentic. Back then I would have said I'm very sincere, which sincere comes from two Greek words, I think, sin and Sarah, which basically means pure. And so when you bought a clay vessel way back, it had a wax seal on the bottom that said sincere, which meant it had never been repaired. So it was a pure vessel, because there were other people who would take broken vessels and mucky puck them together and sell them, and then they didn't hold up. So, but to me, the number one skill in helping people is to establish and build and grow trust. No trust, no sales. N-O trust, N-O sales. K-N-O-W trust, K-N-O-W sales. People like to buy. They like to buy from people they like, trust, and respect, but they don't actually have to like you. They do have to trust you. And if you think back in your own life, there's probably somebody in your life that maybe they rubbed you the wrong way, that your personalities had a little conflict, but you had a great relationship because you trusted them and they trusted you. And so that's, I would tell any aspiring young or older salesperson, work on the trust thing. And one of the things I share with clients are like, well, how do I build trust? And I'm like, well, the simple way is be trustful, be trustworthy. So much of what I work with my clients on, I have $5 million a year clients, I have $100 million a year clients. It's not about what to do. It's like who to be. If you handle the being, the doing will take care of itself. If you just try and do the stuff, I'm just going to go through the motions, that doesn't work that well.
No.
No.
We are human beings, not human doings.
Oh, I'm stealing that, Rocky.
Did you not know that one?
I'm so stealing that. Yeah, I'll give you attribution the first 500 times I use it. And after that, I'm going to think it's my own and I will have forgotten. But it's not because I meant to, just because I have too much in my head. Sometimes people ask me, is that original? I'm like, oh man, I don't know. I met Zig for the first time in 1982. And so did I hear something and have I built on that? I don't know. There's only so much original thought in the world anyway.
I'll take 500 attributions because it's not mine.
There you go. There you go. Well, there you go. So, yeah, I love that. Human beings, not human doings.
Yeah. So we're actually here to talk about your book. What inspired you to write the book, Gratitude, Stories from Our Heart?
Oh, man, thank you so much. I have words, as you can tell. I like to talk and I like to share my words in writing. And so Gratitude, Stories from Our Hearts is my fifth book. And so my first books were about business and helping people do better business, be better business people, be better people. I was in Thailand with my wife. I'm at a conference and I'm listening to a lady speaker. I don't want to, I kind of have to go monitor her session for this group I'm with. I don't want to do it because it's like, this is so foo-foo. I don't want to do it. Because she's talking about the relationship between human emotion and human performance. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But as we're talking about it, as she's talking about it, she shares that humans perform at their very best when they express or experience gratitude, and at their very worst when they express or experience fear or shame. And as she's talking, I'm kind of having this realization that though I've won at almost everything in my life, and not like Midas, I mean, everything I touched didn't turn to gold, but I did win at most everything. But I was like, I'm horrible on the grateful factor. If you and I were working together on a project in a company and you came to me and said, Don, we hit our goal, I'd be like, great, Rocky. But what about this thing Bill's doing where we're horrible? And so that great Rocky took 1/10 of a second. And then I'm already moving on to something that's not being done to my satisfaction. And so I decide, and man, decisions are so pivotal in improvement. I decide I'm going to be better. And so I go to Home Depot and I buy this silver pail. This was pre-COVID. It was like $3.49. Now they're $25. I don't know how much they are now, but they're not $3.49. I take a card and I write the word gratitude on it. And I begin carrying this pail with me everywhere I go, like my little lunch pail. my little silver pail. People are like, what's in your pail? I'm practicing gratitude. And so, yeah, just how I did it. And so I do that for about 6 months. And I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. Okay. Worst traffic on the planet, except for Los Angeles and New York. And there's about 10 places with worse traffic, but pretty bad traffic. And I go from having the reaction when somebody cuts me off of wanting to slam them into the wall, okay, to turn to my wife and say, they didn't kill us. I'm grateful, in about that tone. And so then I decide I'm going to share it with my team, and we begin a weekly gratitude practice. We now do it daily, but a weekly gratitude practice we call One Good Thing, where everybody shares something positive from their personal or family life that we don't know about each other. And as we're doing that, we've been doing that for a couple of months. And if you ever try that, and I literally have thousands of people who do that gratitude practice, your people look at you pretty strange for a while. They're like, this is weird. I don't understand why I'm doing this. But so we've been doing it for a while. I don't know how long. And an employee who worked with me, she'd been out, and she stood up one week and said, I'm grateful. My grandson was born last week, and he survived an hour. Now, horrible, tragic, nothing you can say to make that any better. But the rest of her story was this, but I'm so grateful because he did live. And so my daughter, his mother, my son-in-law, I and my husband, the other grandparents, got to meet him, hold him, and tell him that we loved him. And so I thought I was going to teach my team about gratitude, and when one person goes to teach, two people learn, and typically the person who learns the most is the person who thinks they're teaching. So that had such a strong, powerful impact on my life. I decided I'm going to convince 1 million people to begin a daily gratitude practice. Now, convince might be a little strong, but I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to let the power of gratitude do the work. So I went to 24 friends and asked them to do a gratitude story for my book, our book. And there's 25 daily stories of gratitude. And we suggest to the reader that they read a short story every day. And it might be 2 pages or it might be 5, but none of them are very long, about the power of gratitude in somebody's life. And then we suggest that they play along. So just journal something that you're grateful for that day. And it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be. My gratitude share this morning with my team was my wife has had 3 surgeries in the last 8 months, last being last week. Everything's going great. And so my gratitude share was, we're 4 or 5 days post the third and what I think the final surgery, and she seems to be doing very well, and I am so grateful for that. Sometimes somebody shares a funny story about their dog. It's not for me to judge what you're grateful for. No, that's for you to judge. But the thing I do know about practicing gratitude is this. The more you practice gratitude, the more grateful you become. The more grateful you become, I don't want to say the better your life is, but the better you will look at your life, and that will make your life better. And so we're coming out with a second gratitude stories from our hearts, because I think ultimately we're going to have a year's worth. Literally, I was at a Christmas party, and the mother of somebody who was at the party, who I kind of know, but I don't really know, she came up to me and she said, I want to tell you, I'm so grateful for you. I'm like, I'm grateful for you too, but I'm the gratitude guy. I'm supposed to be. And she said, well, here's why I'm grateful for you. When your book came out, my daughter and her husband, they bought, 100 copies or something. They gave them to a bunch of their leadership team. They own a bunch of 27 restaurants, and to their family. And she said, I've been practicing gratitude every day since that time. And when I'm gone, they're going to have access to what I wrote. And I was like, man, that is so strong. And thank you so much for telling me. And I would just encourage you, let them have access now. Share it with them now, what you're grateful for. And I happen to know they're both daily gratitude practitioners. And so I was like, you can't go wrong sharing the good word. So share the good word. And so I will, with your permission, I will send you a QR code, and every listener could go download the e-copy of the book with my thanks for free. I won't market to you after that. You could just have the book. And if you felt so compelled, and I don't care, but you could go to Amazon and buy a paperback. We donate everything above the publishing cost to St. Jude. So I don't care about making money on books. And it will change how you look at life and it'll make you feel like your life changed.
I concur, and it doesn't have to be anything big. I'll be honest, every morning I turn on the shower and the water's cold, and it takes about 30 seconds to a minute for the hot water to come. And I tell you, I am extremely full of gratitude when the hot water hits.
Sure.
Because just like you talked about earlier, I don't mind spending to heat up the water.
Yeah.
And there is nothing worse than cold water.
It doesn't matter. The thing I know is this: if you practice gratitude daily with intention, you will become grateful for more and more things, and some will be huge and some will be small. That doesn't even matter. It's just the fact that you're living in a state of gratitude. And so it does affect your energy, and it does affect what you do, how you perform. There's just no question about that. The other thing that we do in our daily huddles, we do the one good thing. And the other thing we do is we talk about wins. And so a win is something that's all business. It's like, okay, what's your win from yesterday, Rocky? And it might be something you did really good for the company or for a teammate or for a customer or whatever. And the reason we talk about wins is this: if you want to win a lot, talk about winning a lot. Trick your brain. And, most of our brains are kind of like drunk monkeys, lurching here and there. And they have a zillion random thoughts a day. But the more you talk about winning, the more you'll win. It works in athletics, it works in business, it works in relationships, it works in everything to align yourself with the positive energy of winning. It just does.
Sometimes we forget how good life is.
Oh, so easy to take things for granted. Easy. I forget who put it out, Harvard or somebody. There's this emotion wheel where it lists about 150 or 60, primary emotions, secondary emotions, tertiary emotions. When you look at that, you realize that about 60, maybe 65% of all human emotion is negative. And so if you're thinking negatively, if you're feeling negatively, don't beat yourself up. You're just human. I mean, it's just how we're wired. But know that you control the switch. And so if you want to change how positive you are about life, if you want to begin working on your mindset, the ideal spot to do that is to work on gratitude. And it's as simple as every day, say it to yourself, say it to somebody, write it down, say it to the mirror, and start a sentence with these words: I'm grateful for, and insert whatever you're grateful for. And it'll make a difference. I was speaking, I don't know where I was, but I was speaking to a big group one time and we were talking about gratitude. And afterwards, somebody came up and said, I'm a really thankful person. I was like, great. Are you a grateful person? They're like, well, it's really the same thing. I'm like, is it though? Because see, to me, like when we got on the call before you hit the record button, I said, thank you for having me today. I'm grateful to be here. So the thank you to me is always about something external. So it's like, thank you, Rocky, for having me on the show. And I follow that with, I'm grateful, because that's an internal thing. And so if I really want to practice gratitude, just start your sentence with, I'm grateful for.
I like it. It reminds me how much I forget that I should be more grateful for.
Me too. I've been doing it for 10 years now. Wish I'd been doing it for 40. I still take, it's a sad thing that most people live in a home with somebody they love more than anybody on the planet. And if you ask them where they could be when they felt totally safe and totally confidential, and you said, have you ever said anything to that person that you're like, man, I'm so sorry I said that? And I wouldn't say that to somebody I didn't know very well. I mean, I wouldn't say that to anybody. Yet somehow I said it to the person who means the most to me on the planet. And so that goes one step further. So I've said things to my wife I wish I'd never said, and I wouldn't say to anybody. But if you take it one step further, who's the person you've said the meanest, cruelest things to?
We talk about the mirror all the time on the show.
Man, that guy in the mirror, man, I beat him up.
Well, that's because he's got gray hair.
Yeah, I know. He's happy, though. Every day with hair's a good hair day, Rocky. Every day with hair's a good hair day. So if you're listening and you're human, it's okay. It's all right to be human, okay? I'm always talking about, hey, man, we got to give everybody a little grace. People make a mistake. It's not the end of the world. But the person you got to give the most grace to, probably looks at you in the mirror. And so you can begin to change. If you practice gratitude, I'm telling you, it'll change your life. And I don't know if you'll make more money. You might, but you'll enjoy your life more. I know that. And no matter how much money you have.
I was going to say, you might not need to make more money then.
And you might not. Yeah. Just about everybody I've ever heard of that was trying to make money on their deathbed was miserable.
I was going to say, the 2-year-old Rolex and luxury car just might be okay then.
Yeah, might be. I think, I was a kid and, Howard Hughes, who was at one time the wealthiest man in the world, and he was trying to make money on his death, literally on his deathbed. You're like, man, once you realize you got 86,400 seconds in a week and you got a limited amount of weeks, okay? I mean, if you're 20 years old, I think you have about 1 billion seconds. You're a billionaire. You're just a billionaire in seconds, not in dollars. And so for the most part, you get to spend those how you want. But once you realize that when that account hits zero, it's all over. There's no more. When it hits zero, there's no tomorrow. And so then you have maybe a better perspective on what money actually is, which is just a tool. It's not the end game. Now, I think it's better to have money than not have money. And you got a book behind you. I love this book. So Profit First. And I've met Michael and heard him speak maybe the first time 10 years ago. And if somebody asked me about Profit First and Michael, I would be like, simple genius, which sometimes those are the hardest ones to follow because it's simple. Okay. But it is genius. It is genius. Most people pay themselves last, if ever. Entrepreneurs are horrible at it. Horrible. They're my people, but they stink at it. And in Profit First, aptly named, it could have been named Pay You First. It's the same thing, but there's real genius in the simplicity of that system. And if you haven't read that book, go buy that book. I can't give you that book. Go buy it and tell Michael Don said go buy it and read it. And then follow the simple genius, which will literally take how long, Rocky?
Less than 5 minutes
to set it up, to do it. I mean, it's just like...
setting it up takes a little bit just because some of the banks are slow, but that's the hardest part, is setting it up at the bank. Other than the bank, everything is easy.
Yeah. I was on the board of a nonprofit, and this nonprofit, they would get a big sum of cash once a year, and then they're budgeting it out and using it through the year. And they're going to get some supplemental funds, but like 90% of it they're getting one day. And so I thought it was so interesting. Guy was genius, wealth advisor guy. And he's like, well, we've been pushing money that we saved. We didn't use in the budget. We had in the budget, but we didn't use it. So we didn't spend all of January's money in January. And we've been taking that surplus and pushing it into a reserve or savings account to earn some interest, which I thought, well, yeah, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. Except like in 10 seconds, he had it figured out. He's like, well, since we get all this money at the first of the year, let's put it all in the reserve account and we'll push out the monthly budget to the general account once a month, and we'll earn interest on all of it for 1 month and 88% of it for, 92% of it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, simple genius acts will make a big difference in your life.
I bet you if we sat down with your grandfather, he'd look at this like we are nuts going, yeah, that's just the way you do it.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's the way they used to do it.
Yeah, probably.
And you had made a comment that he used to go collect rent.
Yeah.
And he'd show up at the first of the month to collect rent.
Yeah.
I bet you every single one of those families, or a good amount of them that had the cash ready, had an envelope. And every week when they got paid, they put the rent money in the envelope so that when he came a-knocking, they had the money ready for rent. This is not rocket science. It's basics that we have forgotten to live by. And that's why I partnered with Mike, because I've been doing that since I was 21. The moment I got a job and came out of college, I started automating all my savings. And it was that made me wealthy.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think. It just happened.
Simple genius.
It is simple genius.
Yeah.
I don't know why we can't get more people to do simple genius.
Well, the thing about human behavior is that for a lot of people, they have to hit whatever rock bottom is in their world to change. So the addict pretty much has hit rock bottom, however they view that, before they'll change. So many people have so little financial, even like just personal finance 101, like what every high school senior should know. But we don't teach it in high school, because if we taught it in high school, they maybe wouldn't sign that nationally guaranteed student loan deal for $100,000. They might say, "Ooh, this is scary." They might not accept that credit card offer at 18 with a $10,000 balance, which they got no way. So the thing to me, though, is this. If you want to change, if you want to improve, I don't know how to be perfect. I do know how to improve. And improvement's one step at a time. And so to me, it's a 3-step formula. Ask for help. Go talk to somebody who knows something you don't know. Okay. Rocky knows profit first, probably better than anybody on the planet except Michael, guy who wrote it and the guy who invented it.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I'm not touching that, dude.
I'll tell you why, though. Michael learned it as a lesson and wrote about it. I've always been doing it.
Oh, there you go. Well, and
he just knew how to put it in better words than I could.
Yeah, well,
I'll give him credit for that.
There's power in words for sure.
There's power in that.
There's power in words. One of the things I do is we help people write books. Get a book out of your head and out of your heart. And we have a do it yourself, where you can see a course and use our software and no AI, like your book. Because if you do an AI book, Google and Amazon are going to beat you in the public square. They're going to stamp AI author on your head. And then we have it done with you where they come to a couple-day conference and we write a bunch, and then we have it done for you where we make it really easy. It's expensive, but there's certainly power in words. But to go back to the 3 steps, ask for help. Go to somebody who knows something you don't know. Okay. In this case, if you don't know how to automatically push money into your own pocket, call Rocky. He knows. 2, learn something new. Learn something you do not know. And 3, act on it. And those 3 steps will cause you to improve at whatever you're trying to improve on. Ask for help. Learn something new. Act on it. And you'll begin to make changes. And those changes will make a difference. And like if you're way younger than Rocky and me, it's insane not to. It's insane what even a very modest savings and investment plan started at age 25.
I taught my kids how to do this when they were 5.
Well, there you go. That's even better.
They can do it. They started at 5 and they knew how to do it. To this day, that's how they live.
That's even better. My grandfather would be so proud.
Well, it's because to him, that was just kind of like, when you're thirsty, you drink water. It's common sense.
Yeah. You dig the well before you're thirsty.
You dig the well before you're thirsty, too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You learn to swim before you drown. Not everyone puts the time and effort into looking at what the opportunities are and the problems and preparing for what is about to happen, because most of this stuff is predictable, especially the way we look at the world.
It is. And, you can improve in any area of your life where you actually want to.
That you
ask for help, learn something new, act on it. It's pretty simple.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Oh, man. I kind of got this from Zig, but my faith beliefs, and if anybody want to talk to me about that individually, I'd be happy to do that, but I won't preach from your platform. But my faith beliefs are that God created an abundance of everything. And Zig used to say, "You don't think he created gold and diamonds for the devil's crowd, did you? Do you?" And I was like, there's something to that. And I heard a guy tell a joke the other day. A guy got to heaven, saw St. Peter, and he'd not done very good on earth. And so he brought a pocket full of gold. And he said, "I want to give that to you." And Peter said, he brought some road dirt because streets of gold. So I thought that was funny. Yeah, I don't know why he brought me this road dirt, but he did. Okay. All right. It's hard for me to give short answers, Rocky. You should know that by now. I'm a long answer guy.
That's all right. We'll do our best.
Okay.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Man, this is a big one. For many years and in many rooms, I felt like I was the smartest guy in the room. Many years.
I thought you were.
Well, I thought I was. I thought I were too. And then unfortunately, in a lot of those rooms, I actually was. But that's even worse. And so I wish I had collaborated with people who saw the world differently than me. I don't care what they look like, and I don't care if they wear pants or skirt. I don't care about any of that. Does your brain work differently than mine? Because you may know something I need to know. But if I only hire people who walk and talk like me, that's all I get. Who's me? And me is a pretty good person, pretty good asset, but so much stronger with other people. So much stronger with other people. Took me 30 years to learn that.
There's got to be a zig thing. There is a saying on that one, and I forget what it is. It's about going alone versus going with others, and you go much faster and smarter with others.
Yeah, I think Zig's quote is you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far,
Yeah,
go with others.
I think that is the one.
So truthful. So truthful. And so every team that I'm on today, man, I think a leader only has a couple jobs. One, understanding that they have to get results. Leaders get results. If they're not getting results, get a different leader. They don't work. Leaders and results are synonymous. Job one is cast the vision. What are we doing? Okay. We just did an event here in Fort Worth last fall. I chaired the committee, and the mission was best event ever. They're like, oh, Don, that's pretty clear. I'm like, I'm a clear communicator. Best event ever, best event ever, best event ever. We start every meeting for 18 months with we are doing the best event ever. And then get the best people on the planet to help make the vision, help make the mission a reality. After that, that's kind of what you talked about earlier. Sometimes INTJs, we don't want to be that visionary. We want to be the person who makes the trains run on time. I'm kind of ambidextrous. I can do the trains. I just don't want to, but I think that's what a leader should do. Okay. I'm sorry. Long answer. There's a third question. I'm focusing here.
I'm actually getting much better about being the visionary and seeing that role and sitting into it. But I think that comes from years of just learning and wisdom. So that's why.
I think so. And I also think it's giving yourself time to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
I started writing books and speaking from the stage and creating courses. And some days I'm like a drunk painter. There's no telling what I'm going to create. And some of it's genius and some of it's not. But you can live on the stuff that you do that's really, really good.
That you can. So if you were to give an 18-year-old one piece of wisdom, what would it be?
18-year-old, one piece of wisdom. Only one piece. I would have 5,000 things to tell an 18-year-old.
I know.
If I only had to give one piece, it would be this. Go big now.
Go big now.
Go big now.
I have that book here somewhere. Go big now, I think.
Is there a book titled Go Big Now?
Go big something. We had him on the podcast. I have to figure out. It's over there, I think.
I'm going to have to look it up because as the words were coming out of my mouth, my brain was saying, hey, Don, that'll be a title of a good book. I've written 9. I have more books. There's more to come, folks.
That works.
Go big now.
I don't know. I'll have to go look. I'll tell you afterwards. If people would like to find the books you have written and learn more about you and gratitude, or maybe have that spiritual conversation, where do they find you?
Here's the easiest way. I'm everywhere. YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta. I'm everywhere, but here's the simplest. Don at DonWilliamsGlobal.com. And I can't be Don at DonWilliams.com because there was a very successful country music singer, Don Williams, which I love his music, but I'm never going to get DonWilliams.com. But I am Don at Don Williams Global because I am fortunate to have clients almost everywhere.
And we will make sure to put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Mark, it's been my supreme pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I'm grateful.
As am I. Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything is built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.